Good morning to West Coast United States. Good afternoon to East Coast United States, where Khristina is at, I do believe. And good evening to UK, where Zynx is at. Zynx is first time on the show today. Very happy to have him here. He's put out a lot of great content on X, analysis, questioning things, doing the hard work of not necessarily being popular, but doing what I consider is the best for retail investors and asking a lot of great questions. So happy to have both of you here. You guys have amazing insights, analysis on Metaplanet. So why don't we dive into it? And first, so welcome both of you. How are you guys doing?
I'm great. Had a great conference last week in New York. Tim Coatsman and Ed Julien put on a fantastic event. It was great seeing you in person there, Anders.
Absolutely. Because we exchanged 5-second words of hi in Vegas in May, and now I got to talk to you and J Dog, your partner, and you both have so much great experience from Wall Street and ideas and analysis. So that was awesome. You're good people. It was and what a place to just stand on a rooftop with a view and sipping a drink and talking about what we love in good weather. Zynx, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, thanks. Thanks for having me on. I was getting a bit jealous of what you're describing there. Sounds quite nice.
Would have been nice if you were there, but I get it. It's a longer trip for you.
Still not doxed yet.
Yeah. So.
and go on.
No, go on. You go on.
Yeah. No. Yeah. I'm happy to be on. Yeah. I've been good. I'm glad you guys had a good time. It looked fun. And yeah, maybe in the future I'll be there.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. Would be great if you came out. So, and by the way, I didn't say it in the intro maybe, but this is Bitcoin Treasuries World episode 48, Metaplanet Roundtable, with a focus especially on Metaplanet. And we have, I have for once prepped a little bit and asked Khristina and Zynx different input. I had some ideas. So I put together a little agenda of things that I think would be really good to cover. I think that most people have some level of interest in here. What I will say is currently on Restream, I'm not getting the numbers back from the amount of live viewers from X, which makes me fear that I may not be getting the chat from X either into Restream here. I only see one from YouTube. So if you want to be sure to participate in the chat and we can bring it on screen, then sorry, it seems right now maybe only YouTube is working. But yeah, we could take these one by one. Obviously, the big point is the fact that Metaplanet, they paused the ATM, or they call it something else, moving stride warrants, but basically an ATM program in Japan to do an international race, during which they also had a silent period, so they couldn't answer questions or comment or be interviewed or anything. All right, good to see that X comments actually are coming through. Thanks a lot, Emperor Lightyear. And they paused that so they could raise funds in this international offering from big institutional investors, highly likely sovereign funds. We'll see more about that. They managed to raise $1.4 billion, which allows them to buy a total of around 11,000+ Bitcoin, of which they've already announced today 5,400, which takes them to holding 25,555 Bitcoin so far. Khristina, your thoughts on
that? My thoughts on the international offering. Let's see. Definitely disappointed in the price action of the stock over the marketing period, and then the additional discount they gave at pricing. I think what the offering was a good reminder of is that we're very early in the Bitcoin treasury space, especially as it relates to institutional education and understanding. And, you know, one of the reasons for that is only recently has there been an easing in terms of regulations with respect to Bitcoin overall. especially at the banks, right? So banks haven't been covering Bitcoin. Banks haven't been covering Bitcoin equities. Institutional equity investors have not been buying Bitcoin because if you're an equity fund manager, you buy stocks. So you don't buy Bitcoin, you don't buy Bitcoin ETFs, you're a stock picker. And to date, there really haven't been Bitcoin equities outside of companies like Coinbase, which was recently added to the S&P 500, and then Block, which was recently added to the S&P 500. And so really only recently have active long-only institutions even had a reason to start looking at these companies. And Bitcoin treasury companies are yet another, part of the equation. And so I know Simon had posted that the regulations are different in Japan and the time frame that they announced the deal and priced the deal. It sounded to me like was a requirement in Japan. But just from a traditional capital markets and institutional equity background, when follow-ons are announced, institutions short the stock to drive the price down as much as they can drive it down so that they can buy it as cheap as possible. That's just how follow-ons work. That's just capital markets. And so unfortunately, I think the window was as long as it was. One, because maybe it had to be based on Japan regulations, but two, I think they had to give themselves ample time to really go out, market, and educate institutional investors on not only Metaplanet, but what is a Bitcoin treasury company and why should you pay a premium to MNAV and what is our growth story. And so there was this time frame that allowed people to short the stock, but also I think a required time frame based on what Simon posted in terms of regulations and based on what I think was probably necessary in order to educate people.
What's your take on Zynx? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I think Khristina covered pretty much the reasons why we saw the price action running up to the 9th of September. I could add more on that, but I think she covered that pretty sufficiently. So I would say on the flip side, to be good cop, I'd say whilst I also wasn't too pleased with, let's say the execution, what I do understand is, of course, now they have those relationships with those institutional investors now. They made room for the preferreds, which will allow them to leverage up the balance sheet. And it's one of those ones where it's short-term pain, but in a year's time, in 2 years' time, it's something that we can move on and forget about. And I do appreciate how they responded. Dylan responded to my questions. Simon made a post as well. And I think they've built enough goodwill that whilst in the short term, especially for retail, it's a bit painful, in the long run, I personally can look past it, and I think it will be beneficial overall for the company.
Yeah, me too. I definitely think even though there's some things that didn't work out quite the way that anyone, including Simon and Dylan, wanted, that overall they raised 1.4 billion. Sure, there was a 10% discount, but now you have probably sovereign funds and big institutional names on board that have an interest in the stock going up. One thing I want to hear you guys' opinion on, and all of that is a good thing.
The only other thing I'll add is we don't know how the book was built and what the demand was at what price points. And so the 10% discount could very well have been given on the day of pricing because that's where the demand was. And so it may not have been, Metaplanet giving these big institutions an additional incentive. These big institutions may have said, we're only interested in this amount of stock at this price. And so institutions do weigh in on pricing and they provide valuation feedback and they can scale their indications of interest and say, we want X amount of shares if it prices here. We do 2X if it prices here. And so, the size and the price was very much determined by institutional feedback.
Right.
385 instead of 555 So they didn't do, what they could have at the high end, and they didn't do, the bare minimum either. So I think the size was a good size.
Right.
Can I just
Yep.
add quickly? I also think because it was the first sort of massive international offering, it was very much in the favor of these institutions where they pretty much could have, dictated terms, and they knew that they probably had the upper hand because Metaplanet wasn't going to walk away with, nothing. They had to close some sort of deal. Once it was announced, it was too late. So I don't think we're going to see, hopefully not anyways in the future, a repeat of how everything went
I mean,
down.
my advice to other companies would be to start doing non-deal roadshows, meeting with institutional investors, telling them your story now, with the obvious caveat that we raise capital and down the road there may be an offering, and now you're familiar with our story and we might give you a call.
Yeah. So about on this, on the potential shorting of the stock, and we know that, as I understand, it was not allowed to short the stock that they were buying, but as far as I can see, that doesn't prevent these institutions, to driving down the stock initially with already existing stock to get the price down to where it was around $4 and where it is right now, to then buy the stocks they wanted to hold on to, right? I don't think, from my understanding, that anything prevented them in first, like, cutting the stock in half. Those stocks they were allowed to short, right?
People are allowed to short stocks. And I thought the wording of Simon's post, and I was trying to do two computers so I could look information up, but I couldn't get that quite set up in time. Simon's post on the, nuanced about shorting, he said all Japanese brokers were made aware that it's illegal for investors to use shares they were allocated in the transaction to cover a short. But if I try to really drill down into that, this was an international offering, non-Japan, right? And so I just don't know why he specified Japanese brokers. I mean, it was Morgan Stanley and Cantor who were leading this transaction. And so in the US, people do use allocations of deals to cover shorts. Now, whether or not this was QIB and 144 and there was some restriction, that still is not clear to me. But yes, people can short the stock, and they did short the stock. Whether or not they used shares from the deal to cover it, it's unclear.
Well, he said that short selling the stock and covering with shares from the offering is illegal, and that every broker in Japan was informed of that, and they weren't expecting a 30% decline. Obviously, because it's conjecture, he can't really comment, but I think we all, can make educated guesses of what actually happened.
He said every broker in Japan, but what US brokers?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know.
And the US brokers were the ones who were in charge of the deal, and they were the ones allocating the stock. You had to be a client of Morgan Stanley and Cantor to get your allocation in this offering. They were running the deal, they were running the books, they were in charge of the allocation. So I don't know why he said Japanese brokers, because the Japanese brokers were not the ones facilitating the transaction. That was my confusion.
Yeah, Morgan Stanley were the underwriters.
Yeah, Morgan Stanley and Cantor.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't know, to be honest, but I think they said that lessons were learned, and I would be very, very surprised if there's a repeat of what we saw, because, I think when it comes to MNAV premiums, there's been debate what gives an MNAV premium and whatnot, but we can all agree that a lot of it is to do with sentiment, and there was a lot of people unhappy in the community, and I think one time, cool. I think next time people will be a lot more harsh.
I was very happy that it priced on the first day of the pricing window. I mean, I thought that was necessary rather than drag it out for 2 more days. So I was happy that I saw it priced kind of midday on the first day of pricing. I thought that was a good sign that they just wanted to get it done.
Yeah, they had to, because if they left it open, it would have been just going down and down and down. the share price.
It's good point. And by the way, in terms of discount, then Sander Anderson from the CEO and now executive chairman of H100. I was listening to a podcast yesterday. That was Tim Kotzman, where he had them and SWC in the studio, or him and SWC, where he spoke about, and I do remember it. There was one time he did some private placements with discount, and X, he received a big backlash from X and found out that's not something you want to do, because retail gets upset that someone else gets a discount. Discount has also been given in this round, and I'm not completely necessarily for or against. I do like if no one gets a discount, but I also do see the value of the type of investors that come in and them having a financial incentive in the stock doing well. So I don't claim to be smart enough and knowledgeable enough to know whether that's a good idea or not, but I think we'll probably see less of that.
I found it fascinating that today Tom Lee posted a fund strat, and he's behind this new Ethereum Treasury, Bitmine, that they priced a transaction at a significant premium today to Friday's close. So Bitmine closed in the 60s on Friday, and they priced an offering at $70 a share.
Okay.
I just thought it was fascinating that they were able to actually price it at a big premium to Friday's close, which I've not seen that done ever.
I've only seen close at a premium when it's been a Bitcoin denominated convertible bond. Capital B have done that, and they've managed to do it at a 30% premium. SmarterWeb's done it at a 5% premium. But when it comes to just an equity raise, I've not seen that either. It does strike me as odd. So when the whole Sanders and H100 situation went down, it was me just ramming down his throat, just like, no. Because I think at that point, when it comes to these equity raises, with Metaplanet, I think the 10% discount, if it wasn't for the 30% that had preceded it, everyone would have been fine with that, because it's a lot of capital. Okay, you're getting the big names, the benefit's worth it. But when it comes to just normal equity raising and it's just random people, really, that discount can be distasteful. And I think personally, unless it's like big amounts of money with reputable names, that it should be avoided. But that's just in my opinion.
And big names and big funds is what has happened here. But I totally agree, Zynx. It was it wasn't fun to see the prices first being significantly chopped down. I don't know, down 60%, or actually more from the top, but not from the time, maybe down 50% from the time of announcing it. But they've raised so much funds that they more than 50% increased their net asset values. So that's interesting. Also, they bought now the first tranche of 5,400. If we just go back real quick and look at the numbers, so they had 20,138 Bitcoin, I think, before. Now they bought today announced 5,419, which took them to 25,555 Bitcoin. They still have, I think, more than half of the funds left, which I think most of it will be used to buy more Bitcoin. But also they mentioned that they will be allocating funds as I guess security for selling Bitcoin put options. And that is what is part of how they drive revenue and profit in Metaplanet. So that's interesting. I'm wondering how much will go in those two buckets. I presume by far most into Bitcoin. Back a couple of months ago, when I looked at the rough numbers in terms of how much yield does that put option selling strategy in and of itself generate, and I'm sure it can vary a lot, and that was very just table napkin kind of math, but the numbers at the time indicated that in and of itself would give a 3% yearly BTC yield, which is, go ahead.
So they're with the CSPs, they're planning to obviously use that to pay off the dividends for the preferreds, and I think it's around $140 million. I think 10% of what was raised they're going to use for the CSP strategy, which obviously is going to be used to pay off the dividends for the preferreds. which as a shareholder, I think that's I like it. It means higher torque, less drag on the common stock. Obviously, there's a lot of people that complain about MSTR selling their common stock to pay off the dividends for the preferreds. So Metaplanet have deviated and are using the CSP strategy to do this.
And Zynx, probably, as you know, more about, as far as I think Jesse Meyer said, SWC, that they're able to do the same strategy in UK, right? Where I think that US companies are restricted from doing that. That would change, as I understand, their classification as the type of company they are, and they wouldn't be able to do the rest of it. What do you have some insider, or not insider, but some information on that?
Yes, I'm pushing for it personally. I've been saying let's do it. I'm going to make another post today saying that we should do it in SWC, just because I think, especially until these Bitcoin treasuries, the flywheel plays until they reach a certain level of escape velocity, having that ability to generate cash is important. Especially as the company is expanding operations and the operating business is, pretty much a minuscule part of the business now. I think having that optionality and perhaps looking forward to the future, I do like the idea of generating cash to pay off the preferreds rather than selling the common stock.
Yeah, I think
So,
Andrew was speaking about that of Smarter Web on the Tim Kotzman podcast with Sander recently. And I think he was acknowledging that they are now at the size and scale where that type of strategy probably makes sense for them. So it sounded to me like that's something that they're probably going to be implementing. And with respect to Metaplanet, I mean, I think it's a huge positive for them. And it's one of the reasons why I really like the company. I think it gives them a unique advantage, especially as it relates to the dividends on the preferreds. And I was just checking just a couple of days ago on the 17th, Simon posted that they are expanding their Bitcoin income generation business through an establishment of a new U.S. subsidiary called Metaplanet Income Corp. And I think, a while back when they allocated additional funds to the U.S., there was a lot of speculation that they were doing that in order to run this options business out of the U.S. to be able to access the liquidity of the U.S. capital markets.
Gotcha. But have you not also understood that American companies cannot do this?
I've heard something about that, but I don't know what truth there is to that. And it would seem that they wouldn't be opening this additional income generating business and tapping into, I mean, maybe it's true that US companies can't, and maybe Metaplanet is able to because they are a Japanese company that happens to have access to US markets.
Yeah.
I have heard that.
I mean, the three of us are looking at it, and many others, as very advantageous to run this strategy. So why is strategy not, or one of the 10, 15 other backs Bitcoin accumulating companies in US? Why is no one else doing it here in US? I heard the thing about the legality that is not possible here. It will mess with the regulations, but I just wanted to hear you guys' opinion as well.
Keep in mind that, Simon did this and he was the first one to do it. And it makes sense because of his background, right? He was a former Goldman Sachs derivatives trader. I mean, that's what he did. And so for him to implement this at Metaplanet makes a ton of sense. And yes, maybe others will follow suit now that they've seen how successful he was able to do so.
I think it's more just, Sailor and Strategy have their ideas on what they think is best. And, Metaplanet are, they've pivoted in a couple key areas, such as, the proof of reserves, how they're going to pay off the dividends for the preferreds. And I think it's yet to be seen which strategy is the best as of now. And maybe, how Sailor's doing it, using the ATM on the common stock and the preferreds to pay off the dividends is the better strategy. But it's just, because we're at the edge of innovation, all these new things and these new ideas, it's hard to say which is best. But all I can do is just evaluate myself and see what I like the look of. And I definitely am feeling the CSP strategy to pay off the dividends off the preferreds.
And I think you're right, Zynx. We are at the edge of innovation. I mean, even Saylor said it at the conference last week. He thinks we're year one into this, financial uncramping of the system, and that it probably takes, 4 years to get to where he thinks we should be. And so I think companies are going to continue to innovate, and companies are going to continue to make mistakes, and we just, learn from it and move forward. Best practices.
Agreed.
So speaking of the preferreds, which I think, well, I call them, it's a little bit of the holy grail it's been looking like in terms of really stepping up very significant, very low risk fundraising to drive very significant Bitcoin purchases. A BTC yield means increase in Bitcoin per stock, which is what drives shareholder value and allows these stocks to outperform Bitcoin significantly, which is why we are here and have something outside. We have exposure to this equity wrapped Bitcoin, let's put it that way. But talking of that, so Metaplanet, as I understand, has announced that they will start selling 2 of these in Q4. One that is straight up a yield product, and the one that I personally really love for holding through a potential bear market, if there is a such next year. And that is the convertible perpetual preferred. The reason I like it for a bear market is there's let me put it this, there's limited downside compared to the stock itself. But if the stock runs, they'll still go up. So it's a more safe place to be compared to the stock itself if the stock moves south. But I think we all clapped our hands when Saylor had a very successful IPO on Stretch, which is the monthly yielding, so preserving the principal capital more or less, and then it's the yield that differs. So you don't as such have as much capital risk. You have a risk of maybe it'll pay less dividend, but you can more or less be sure you're getting your money back. However, that's months ago now. They raised a lot, 2.4 billion, but we have not touched $100 yet, let alone 101, where they can start ATMing it. I believe that's what they have to reach. So that kind of told me, well, it was very successful because a lot of people, probably including you, Khristina, bought some of this because you could get it at $92 and expected a relatively easy, almost 10% increase just to get back to 100. But we're not there yet. So it maybe is an iPhone moment, but the iPhone is not selling yet, if that makes sense. What's your thoughts on that?
So I got my dad to buy it, and he does not buy stocks, but I did get him to buy STRC. And I just think this goes back to, there's an education process that needs to take place institutionally. And the distribution just is not there yet. I mean, brokers are not talking to their clients about these products yet. Outside of X, retail probably doesn't know about these products yet. And so the market is just waking up to the innovation that's taking place in this space in the introduction of some of these new products. And I think it's just going to take time, but there will be this moment of inflection. I mean, the banks can move very quickly, but they also move very slow. And, being a former equity capital markets institutional salesperson, people have teach-ins, and you learn about products, and then you have analyst coverage, and then you try to get meetings with clients, and it just doesn't all happen overnight.
Yeah, I think it's just we're just too early right now, and I think it will take time for these products to get a credit rating, for example. Khristina mentioned about distribution. I think that's one thing we do in the UK a lot better than in the US, is the distribution of these fixed income products will come through the, the two main brokers, and, everyone would get an email about it, for example. So I think it's just strategy is just 4 or 5 years ahead of everyone else. And they're building the railways for this new financial system, and it will come just with time once people get more comfortable with Bitcoin being, used as collateral. I just looked at Stride, STRD, the dividend yield, effective yield is around 12.57%, which is ridiculous, really. And you look at the BTC rating on that, collateralized, I think, over 5.5x, something like that. So it's just a massive opportunity for people who understand these products to get, if they want a fixed income product, to get it early, high yields, probably see some capital gains on that as well. But yeah, I think it will just take time. I'm not too bothered. I'm most definitely certain, well, 99% sure that, fixed income products are going to be built off the back of Bitcoin, and it's just a moment of time. So it's just an educational
Totally
process.
agree.
And also, you got to remember that a lot of these managers and these funds have certain mandates, and I don't think they would have been given the go-ahead to invest in these type of products. So, fixed income tends to be very safe, very conservative. You're not going to find many that's like, yeah, okay, Bitcoin collateralized, let's go. So, yeah.
But I'm definitely looking forward to that. Education has gone wide enough on the financial markets among TradFi, and as we learned from Saylor, his prefs, despite being now IPO together for 3+ billion, they still don't have any credit rating. That hopefully will improve before, or at least by the time that they are included in S&P 500, which could happen in December. Maybe it happens next year. No one knows. There's no guarantee, yada, yada, yada. And by the way, none of this is financial advice. It's financial education, maybe entertainment. And if you do like that, hit like and subscribe and all the good stuff. Also, just a quick shout out to my boy Eximus there that says yo on the screen. He made this hat and gifted it to me, my new Metaplanet hat. Liking it, so thank you for that, Jonas. He prints different stuff, Bitcoin stuff as well here. He's in LA. Anyways, not financial advice. So looking forward to seeing some credit ratings on these, and so what's your guys' expectations for? I saw, who was it? It was someone asked for Mike Livet asked for the timeline for the prefers. Do we agree it's Q4 that's supposed to be the timeline for Metaplanet prefs, the two of them in Q4? And what's your expectations?
I'll let Khristina go first.
I was going to say, I actually wasn't sure that a timeline had been outlined. So I was curious when you said Q4. I don't recall reading that, but if you have, fantastic. Zynx, I don't know if you are familiar with the timeline that's been laid out.
Yeah, so I'm expecting them to come in Q4. I actually am of the opinion they've already had a lot of interest in the preferreds, and that's why the international offering came, because I was thinking, this is how I'm thinking of it in my head, the demand was so big that they needed to then do an international offering to create a cap space for it, to build up the Bitcoin NAV on the balance sheet. And I think when the preferreds come, they're going to be very, the demand's going to be there. I think that was something that we'll get in Q4.
Yeah, I think the Metaplanet preferreds are another one of the best things about this story right now. I mean, we always talk about how yield-starved Japan is, but the reality is too that they are a market which I would now describe, and I think I was misunderstood when I first bought Metaplanet about the investor base in Japan. When I first bought Metaplanet, I was kind of under the impression that you had this very dynamic Japanese investor base, you know, that loved Metaplanet and loved stocks, and there was this kind of army behind it. But, you know, kind of fast forward to where we are today, and I would say I would revise what I thought I was getting into to being that it's definitely a more timid investor base. You know, I now know that Japanese investors have 50% of their wealth in cash, earning nothing. And so you're talking about trillions of dollars yielding basically zero. And so the preferreds for Japan, if they can get the distribution, they can get the education, and they can offer, call it 6%, there will be a very strong appetite for that.
Yeah, Jesse, it's a McDonald's hat.
Yeah, we've got management from SWC here asking which hat Zynx. I'm betting it's a McDonald's hat, but
yeah, it's a McDonald's hat.
yeah.
I'm gonna make a new one with a Metaplanet hat. But to go back to your question, yeah, so I've been positively surprised with the investor base, the Japanese investor base. They've got a vibrant community here on X, and I think with Japan as well, these investors tend to be very loyal investors with their home companies, their local champions, and I think, as you mentioned, you know, they're very yield starved, they high levels of, you know, household savings. Why are they going to earn, you know, I think the 10-year bond right now is 1.6% when they can get 6% from these Metaplanet preferreds? Like, it's the perfect environment. If these Bitcoin backed fixed income products ever going to work, it's going to work first in Japan. And I think that's what makes Metaplanet so exciting. You know, it's the best place in the world for these sort of products. And that's why I'm irresponsibly long Metaplanet.
Same here. Absolutely same here. So one thing I've noticed, I'm sure you guys have seen the same, that we're, you know, different platforms and the companies themselves showing MNAV calculations that are not the same. The numbers are not the same. Metaplanet in particular, I know, are showing non-diluted MNAV, and it's really the diluted as an investor, I think, is what we should focus on in terms of how accretive is ATMing the stock. And I don't think that strategy tracker that I usually look at is updated with the new with this new tranche and purchase, because he's showing a BTC quarter to date yield of 10%. And I know that the yield now is more. Ragnar does a lot of calculations. I believe it's above 40% now for the quarter. So I'm not sure exactly what where it is right now. I don't know if you have you looked at Ragnar's calculations this morning, or I don't know if he's even been able to update.
But yesterday or the day before, I actually did reach out to Metaplanet just via the contact us page on their website. And I asked them to update their data analytics page to include both basic and fully diluted, and to clarify what they were currently posting. And so I just sent in the form. I haven't heard back, but I did suggest that they provide a little bit more transparency on the calculations.
You're doing God's work. I definitely think that they should include diluted MNAV.
Yes.
I don't know why they wouldn't, to be honest. As an investor personally, I do my calculations based on diluted MNAV because it feels more relevant. I'm sure they have their own reasons, you know, hopefully not to make it look better, but you know, just, yeah, the diluted MNAV is very important.
I agree. To me, the two most, by far most important metrics, and if Jesse, if you're still watching, so this one also goes to you. What I find most useful is the two things. One is the MNAV, diluted MNAV, where you can see what premium are you actually paying. What are you paying for this company compared to what they hold? And you're willing to pay more if you believe that they can yield a lot going forward, which is based on, well, how much are they yielding here and now, kind of. That's why the other one that is really important for me, that I would like to see, and Jesse, I hope you guys are gonna include it on your webpage. I already communicated with Andrew on it, so I hope it is included. But the quarter to date BTC yield, because in Q3, I don't care too much what happened in Q2 or Q1. That's history. Under your current market conditions, what are you performing for me as investor, like here and now? And that's why I like to look at quarter to date BTC yield, and then you can do different useful calculations in terms of like, when do you cover that? But if price of the stock changes, that changes a lot. So for me, those two, I make my own sort of indication or evaluation of how much am I paying, what are they yielding right now, and will that, based on those two, be a good purchase or not? So I'm hoping to see that, including on SWC's coming updated analytics page.
So what they do have, Smart Web, is with the RNS, which is, you know, when the news is announced, they do post the year-to-date BTC yield, but also the 30-day BTC yield as well. So I definitely agree with these companies that if you want to look at velocity, oh look, there we go. He said we'll be adding Q2D BTC yield for our upcoming analytics dashboard update. Very
awesome.
nice.
Yeah, thank you very much for that, Jesse. Awesome. I agree with you, Zynx, that the 30-day is interesting, and I love to see it's even more what's happening here and now, especially in the beginning of a quarter where we haven't seen anything yet. So that's a really nice one. But it's just hard to find it very useful when the other backs are not doing it. So I love seeing it from SWC. Props to them, Jesse, Andrew, for putting that out. But I do want to be able to compare. So if Metaplanet start doing that as well, and strategy, H100, etc., that would be great. But thank you very much, Jesse.
Can I just say, the thing is though, we have to beware is that the smaller the company is, the Q2, the yield numbers are going to look even better. So what we had at the beginning of this Bitcoin Treasury euphoria is a company would start on 2 Bitcoin, get to 8 Bitcoin, and post, 400% BTC yield. So I think for people to just bear that in mind, if strategy is posting, 5% BTC yield over a quarter, that's because obviously they're starting on far bigger numbers. So we have to be cautious with base effect maths as well. So, yeah.
So totally agree, Zynx. And that's why the number was kind of useless when you were looking at the quarter to date BTC yield, the quarter that the company was launched, right? But as soon as you move into a new quarter, like, all right, from this basis of a couple of hundred Bitcoin, what are you able to yield now? And that's where the smaller companies so far, historically, at least the market leaders, of which Metaplanet clearly is in Japan, SWC in UK, are doing better. But so the market leaders still have, when they're smaller, like both Metaplanet and SWG compared to strategy, they can still, we may be moving out on the risk curve, although I would say Metaplanet is now as safe, in my opinion, an investment and MSGR as an MSGR. SWC maybe a step further out on the risk curve in their journey, but also the upside of Metaplanet compared to strategy, I do see is significantly bigger. SWC, same kind of thing coming into play. I don't know what you guys, how you guys see that.
I'll let Khristina answer first and I'll go after.
In terms of the upside and the risk versus smarter web, or what?
Yeah, I mean, there wasn't necessarily actually a question there. It's just if you had any, like if you shared that sentiment of mine, like, yes.
So and Zynx and I might be reversed on this, in the sense of, like, based on where he's based and when I got into Metaplanet, And so, I made my first purchase of Metaplanet on May 1st at $3.01. And I went in pretty big and heavy. And so Metaplanet is now, it used to be the number one, but based on share price performance, it's now my second largest holding, behind ASTS. Not to be confused with ASST. ASTS, it's a space satellite company, is my largest holding, followed by Metaplanet. Again, just because of Metaplanet's price performance, not because I've sold or reduced the position. So I bought Metaplanet May 1st. And, I did so because I understood Bitcoin, I understood MicroStrategy. And when I learned about Metaplanet, I was just like in. And because I took such a big position very quickly, I spent a lot of time really understanding the details of Metaplanet. I joined the Discord, very active in the Discord, was on the live stream, asking questions, watching the trading on a nightly basis for months. And so I really dug into Metaplanet. Conversely, I didn't buy Smarter Web until, I want to say, July. And so my cost basis and my entry point on Smarter Web is much worse. Smarter Web is probably one of my, it's become a very big position because I've been averaging down. It's become a very big position. I've been averaging down, but I'm also down a lot on that stock. And it's because I just had a very different entry price. And so it's only been more recently when I've really been like, okay, why did I buy this stock? Why do I own it? Why do I keep buying more? Why am I averaging down? And is this something that I want to continue to own? And the reality is, the more work I do on Smarter Web, the more excited I am about the company. And I'm not just saying that because, people are listening and I own a lot and I'm down a lot. Like, I really, really enjoyed and was highly impressed when I had the opportunity to meet both Andrew and Jesse in New York last week. And I really like where they are in their growth story. I really like their flywheel. I love their thoughts on how they raise capital. I like the communication. And so there's no reason that Smarter Web, in my opinion, shouldn't be as big as my Metaplanet position. When I just think about the companies side by side, now that I've actually done the work on Smarter Web.
Yeah, the risk reward is, I think, really attractive at both. Again, maybe the Metaplanet is a little bit safer because they're further in the journey, but then the upside is a little bit high in SWC. Those two are my main positions personally as well. Zynx, feel free to add, obviously, at any time. We're just having organic organization here, but just swinging back to our some of the bullet points that we wanted to discuss. Let's see, what have we not covered yet? How far did we get? We spoke about the shorting already. Khristina, I don't know if we spoke last week on that rooftop party about the "you want to borrow" tweet from Simon, and it may have triggered some level of test of ego, small battle, a taunt that could have if had a negative effect, maybe actually at the end of the day. And then if you want to talk to that, we can. Otherwise, we skip on and then we can chat on the communication, all the answers that has come back from Simon and Dylan. But you want to touch upon that, or
what do you want borrow? You guys can have that.
Well, I'll just say at the time, I was very disappointed in that comment. I really hated it. I told my partner, J-Dog, like, what is he doing? I just felt like you're poking a bear, right? Like, Jim Chanos is a very well-known, legendary, dedicated short seller. And you just are putting a target on your back. And I just don't think it was necessary. I wish he hadn't have done that.
You know what? I loved it. I'm sorry, I loved it.
I had fun.
No, I mean, and people in the Discord loved it, and people were like, "He's defending the company," and there's definitely That's what makes a market, right? People have different feelings about
Yeah.
comment. I hated it.
Maybe, you know what, I just, I just love the because Chanos, oh man, he's just so bearish on all these companies, and I just think, I personally don't mind the CEOs of these companies doing crazy stuff, taunting, doing all. Obviously, it's only good if in the long run, things are a success. If it had a negative effect, who knows? Maybe Chanos organized some extra shorting on the stock. Who knows? I don't know. But yeah, personally, I loved it.
Let's take an update on that. Are you guys aware of what's the current outstanding shares short percentage? And sooner or later, these guys might want to close their shorts. So, do you see like what do you see in the market? If you have any opinion on like when it could swing the other way? I mean, as a shareholder in Metaplanet, I witnessed that short squeeze or whatever it was that happened in. I think it was in May, and the stock in Germany shot up to an equal value of $22, and I had gotten in at $4. So I remember talking to my buddy, also a shareholder, is like, all right, this looks like a short squeeze. It's a lot of fun. What are we supposed to do? Are we supposed to sell something or what? And we looked at it, and before the US market opened, it crashed again. So I never ended up doing anything. But what are you guys seeing in the market right now, if you see anything on the short squeeze?
I don't have the current numbers for. Do you have them, Khristina?
I don't have them in front of me, but I did see a post or comment this morning or yesterday that it does seem that shorts have been pretty aggressively covering. And so the short positions from Citi, and I forget the other bank, have almost been closed out. And, to my surprise or disappointment, the stock really hasn't felt like there's been a squeeze of any kind.
No squeeze.
Yeah, but the short interest has come down.
Yeah, no squeeze to the upside for sure.
I just think, as if you're not trading these stocks, you just have to ride it. We'll probably get another short squeeze sooner or later again at some point. I do think it's incredibly dangerous to be short in these stocks. Obviously, there's people making money doing it, but Bitcoin can rip at any time. Yeah. And the NAV on the balance sheet of these companies are just going up and up and up. So yeah, I just think if you're a retail investor, you don't really want to be trading these stocks as actively as, because you might just get burnt by people that are short in the stock.
Yeah. Also, just a thank you to the currently more than 900 live viewers across X and YouTube. Thank you for tuning in. It kind of makes it fun to do this, and then I can get smart people like Khristina and Zynx on when somebody cares to watch. Although honestly, we'd probably have these conversations just to improve our own investments. That actually is the basis of me doing these shows, is for me to try and hone my own investment thesis and make better investments. Well, actually now it's 1,000.
Can I ask Zynx a question?
Yeah, absolutely.
I know you've done, a lot of work and have opinions on like the underlying operating businesses.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if you've taken a close look at Metaplanet's hotel business. And if you have any thoughts on that, because I know on the last earnings call, they definitely, announced a bit of a pivot, going from, at one point saying that they were going to make this into like the Bitcoin hotel. And there was even like a separate Bitcoin hotel Instagram with, a graphic image, to then saying, we've kind of done the numbers and, that type of investment doesn't necessarily make sense. And we are going to have kind of a Bitcoin lounge in the lobby for Bitcoiners to come and, socialize and what have you. I mean, the details were somewhat limited, but I don't know if you've actually done any type of deep dive into their hotel business.
No, only just because it's a tiny, tiny percentage of what's going on here. I think it's nice for a meme and for the legacy of the have a hotel but I don't think it's going to have any material effect on us, especially not after what just happened with the raise.
I didn't know if it's like, is it profitable? Are they able to use cash flow? Is there a carry cost? Like, is there a real estate expense? Is there a tax expense?
I think it's profitable. I think I saw that on the earnings call that on the presentation they had this like pie chart thing, and I think it was just a tiny bit. I think the CSP strategy now is going to dwarf it after this 140 million that's going to go into it now. But yeah, I think it is profitable, I believe. Don't quote me on that.
Because I know Smarter Webs is profitable and generating cash that they're actually able to use to buy Bitcoin. So I wasn't sure if there was a comparison done of any
No,
kind.
it's tiny amount. Smarter Web is it's interesting with Smarter Web. I think the good thing, going back to Smarter Web, you guys, Khristina was talking about her portfolio, and you guys were talking about Smarter Web being, further along the risk curve. How I like to see these treasuries is the sort of 3 stages. Metaplanet and Strategy, they've both managed to issue preferreds. They've reached a level of, institutional interest where there's sort of an escape velocity there, where, especially after this international offering, I don't see Metaplanet failing anytime soon. I think they're going to be, it's only going to get faster and faster, the Bitcoin accumulation. And then you've got the next layer down where they have functioning ATMs, but they don't yet have enough Bitcoin on the balance sheet to support preferreds. So you're looking at the capital Bs, you're looking at the smarter webs, and then you're going extremely off the risk curve when you're investing in companies that don't have enough trading volume to support a functioning ATM. I think anything past sort of smarter web capital B right now, you're getting extremely risky. It's not financial advice, but trading volume to support a functioning ATM is very, very important for these flywheels. And
I agree. The capital raising environment is very difficult. So if you can't execute an ATM and you have to go to the market to raise deals privately, like it's just getting increasingly challenging to get that money in the door. So you really need liquidity.
Yeah, exactly. And just to show Smart Web, obviously I'm biased, but I think the most exciting thing about the company is that because of how our equity markets are, it's actually quite easy for the company to get included into like the FTSE 250 and then the FTSE 100, and there's automatic inclusion. So it doesn't work in the way that it works for strategy for the S&P 500. You meet certain criterias, you're automatically included. And, smarter web's getting to the point now where it's touching within touching distance of being automatically included in the FTSE 250, which, people are not taking into consideration, but I think that's probably something that's very, very exciting for the company. I know this is a Metaplanet podcast, but just putting that out there.
Yeah, no, I think it's okay that we have, because this is the same kind of questions. I mean, again, the basis of me putting these shows together is to hone our investment thesis, my own, and people who care, people like you guys who join with phenomenal takes, and the viewers. So when it's relevant to discuss one compared to the other, the pros, the cons, where are they on risk, on upside, etc. It's I think this is the kind of conversation that we do want to have. But you touched upon the indexes there, Zynx. So why don't we just, because you spoke about before we got started here on the FTSE indexes inclusions for Metaplanet, and then we can go back and talk about the I think great responses we've been getting from Dylan, and especially you from Dylan and Simon on a lot of questions. But do you want to just talk to the FTSE indexes inclusion and what that could mean?
Yeah, so I think as of today, actually, effective trading from today, Metaplanet has been included in the FTSE All World Index, the FTSE Developed Index, FTSE Global Mid Cap Index, etc. And what that does is obviously open the company up to a lot more passive flows from these index buyers. So, you know, that's just another amount of upwards pressure on the stock. First with the quarterly rebalancing, and then every month, just, you know. And I think Adam Livingston did the numbers. I think someone said it was up to $200 million, perhaps 150 to $200 million for the rebalancing. And then
just from this one index?
Well, it's multiple FTSE indexes. So you've got the
Right.
FTSE All World Index, you've got the FTSE Developed Index, FTSE Global Mid Cap Index, FTSE MPF All World Index, and then the FTSE Developed X Multinational Index. So it's quite a few FTSE indexes. And I'll have to double check the numbers. I'll look now whilst Khristina takes over.
Sure. So, and I want to add something there. When people are negative on the ATMs, but it is, apart from being accretive running the ATM, when it comes to the indexes, it is, you'll get a further benefit from that, because the indexes, they rebalance not based on the price of the share, but on their market cap. So if you can ATM a lot at, let's say, MNAV, diluted MNAV 1.5, that increases your market share proportionally quite a bit, maybe compared, depending how much you're doing it, compared to other companies. When the rebalancing comes, then the automatic passive purchases are coming from the indexes. So when you do the ATM, even when the MNAV is lower, it's benefiting not only the here and now, but the rebalancing will send substantial money your way if you have increased your market cap this way. And that, I think that's a very important part to have included there.
I mean, speaking about the Metaplanet specific ATM or their moving strike warrant program, I know that it's kind of changed over time in terms of the timing of it, the amount of days that they use for pricing. And my only my feedback and opinion would be that I would like to see Metaplanet being less transparent with the market in terms of how they're executing their moving strike warrant program. I think they're giving too much transparency, which then allows shorts to short the stock and manipulate the stock in and around the timing of their ATM. You don't have other companies, whether it's Bitcoin treasury companies or other companies that facilitate ATMs, that say, this is where we're going to execute our ATM and it's going to be around this price. I mean, that's just too much information for hedge funds.
Okay, good point. I mean, you're the one with the Wall Street background here, so it's good to hear.
Yeah, so the numbers I just checked were between 50 to 100 million when it comes to the rebalancing. And obviously it all depends on the weighting they get in the index. As obviously the market cap for the company increases, obviously it's going to be higher and higher. I think that's all so exciting for Metaplanet. And just another thing, Metaplanet is an international company now. It's not just eating the capital in Japan. This international offering has really changed, the whole entire Metaplanet value proposition. And I think it's one of the only Bitcoin treasury companies outside of Strategy to have that international outlook, which, I think it's just very bullish for the stock.
Totally agree. And Zynx, you remind me of a point that I personally like or have, which is when you have a company like Metaplanet that have a phenomenal setup in Japan in terms of regulations and capital markets and everything, that to me really is the ideal market jurisdiction in terms of running this playbook, and they're doing very well, so that it is looking good. But as long as you have the local advantages like they do in Japan, international investors want to invest in the local advantage. So we are buying Metaplanet stock because we love the local setup. And then so it's not only a matter of, okay, so locally we can gather capital. No, if you have good local setup, international investors like the three of us will pour in capital as well.
Absolutely important. I wouldn't touch a Bitcoin treasury company that isn't their own local champion. That's one of my key rules. It has to be the local champion, otherwise, not for me. That's the
And
base.
one of the things I think is funny / interesting, I mean, maybe for some it's not funny, but the leading capital market in the world, US, has, you know, more than half of all the treasury companies, it seems, in the world. Yet there is not a single one that currently, including Strategy, really is yielding Bitcoin per share at a high level. Granted, Strategy has done for the year about 26%. Would that be correct? I'm looking at strategytracker.com. But that's not high when you're looking at Metaplanet and some of the other treasury companies. But that's a whole other thing. Maybe we could touch upon that in the end, or we can jump into it now. Strive's acquisition of or planned acquisitions, they've entered talks, as I understand, of Semler, but at a 210% premium. They were trading at 0.85 MNAV before diluted Semler. So if you're paying that much premium, it's like you're paying twice the price of Bitcoin. So I don't fully understand how is that in ASST's, aka Strive's, best interest. Now, obviously it is, otherwise they wouldn't be doing it. There's very smart people in on the board, in the management, you know, in the team. We know, I think, all the names, and there's a lot. Have you guys figured that out? Why does that make sense for Strive?
Khristina, you go first, or?
I mean, I haven't dug into the numbers. I don't necessarily know if the headline is totally accurate on a 210% premium. When the pipe was priced at $1.35, and that's unlocking at some point. I don't think it's unlocked yet. So I'm not in the weeds in the numbers. I don't own ASST. I wouldn't own it until the pipe unlocks if I were to own it. And I didn't own Semler. So I just haven't spent the time to figure it all out.
Same here.
Yeah, I haven't had the time to figure it out. But one thing that I'm thinking of is that obviously, because it's an all stock acquisition, they didn't have the reason why they had to pay such a premium is obviously because they wouldn't have otherwise been able to acquire that Bitcoin because they don't have an ATM, for example, to get going. That's all I can sort of think of. I'm going to look into the numbers and everything afterwards, but I'm sure it would make sense. But I think it just goes to show that, you know, I do believe it's a winner takes most market in each major jurisdiction. Semler were the second public company in the US to put Bitcoin on a balance sheet, and it's, you know, if we're being honest, it's struggled throughout its journey to maintain any sort of MNAV premium. So I think this acquisition is, you know, the best thing for everyone involved, really.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm sure we're going to hear more about that, and probably True North, which has been acquired by Strive, is going to explain that. So hopefully they have something on Wednesday on that. By the way, on Wednesday, I'll be doing a Smarter Webly Wednesday with Andrew and Jesse. And Thursday, I will be doing an H100 happy hour. I just thought that was a fun name because it's HHH with Sander and Brian. Getting back on the horse here and producing some content for my own and others' entertainment and hopefully useful thoughts and ideas. All right, going back to Metaplanet, it is a Metaplanet roundtable, of course. Zynx, you are asking a lot of great questions on X and challenging different things going on. And you had some questions from Metaplanet, and then both Simon and Dylan gave a lot of answers once the silent period was up. What's your overall take on what you're hearing back?
So all I was really looking for, because I knew the answers to some of the questions I was answering anyways, I knew that they couldn't participate, for example, in the speculation or the conjecture that, oh, you know, people are shorting the stock, and because obviously, you know, they're just not going to do that. all I really wanted was to hear that things didn't go to plan and that they were able to admit that, because then, to me, I'm more than happy, I'm more than willing, and I'm sure everyone else is, that, you know, we're at the edge of innovation. These things happen. You know, you can't foresee the future. You can't pre-plan everything. I think it would have been more difficult for me if the response was, well, this is what we anticipated, because then it feels like a sacrifice, right? You know, the retails have been sacrificed for the institutions. To some people, it still feels like that. But yeah, so Dylan responded basically explaining that, you know, things didn't necessarily go to plan and that they learned a lot from this experience. But he also explained that in the long run, pretty much is going to be worth it. Wait to see the names that have, participated. Someone left a cheeky comment and he messaged saying, well, wait until you see the disclosures, which I thought was very interesting. So to me, that says that you're going to get, you know, these world-class names, household names that have taken part in the offering. You know, he mentioned as well that they did everything on their behalf in terms of informing the Japanese brokers that this is the law, Japanese law. Obviously, as Khristina said earlier, she's there's a bit of a confusion there because it was underwritten by American companies. But I think the overall response to me was pretty cool, pretty good. I was satisfied, especially when Simon made his post as well. They recognized that, yeah, they wasn't planning to see this 30% drawdown, and that ultimately in the end, with the situation that they were left in, you know, they did the best that they could do, and in the long run, it should be beneficial to shareholders. So yeah, I was happy with that.
Yeah, awesome. If you have any comments, Khristina, obviously you just jumped in.
I'm in this stock for the long term. I didn't buy a Bitcoin treasury company to sell it 3 months from now, 6 months from now. I really believe in the future of what these companies can build. And so was I going to sell it at the time the offering was announced and, you know, try to trade it and buy it back? And that's just not what I do. And I take like very large positions in a stock. So I'm a long-term investor, and I'm, you know, happy to be a long-term investor. I believe in the fundamentals of the company. I like the management team, and I think we're heading in the right direction with everything that we have to look forward to.
Absolutely. I had my questions because I made my major move at 875 yen. So the international offering was coming, and then the 30%, I was like, oh. But obviously I'm in it for the long run. I've experienced this volatility for a long time with Bitcoin, and I just think, this is just a blip. It's in the wider sentiment of Bitcoin treasuries as well. You know, it's if you're here for the next couple of years, not financial advice, but I believe this stock's going to do very, very well.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny, I have people messaging me and, you know, like, how are you holding up? Metaplanet. It's like, I'm holding up fine. Like, this position was sized and entered and scaled like appropriately. You know, my average cost basis is around $4. And yes, I left a lot of paper profits on the table by not selling it when it went to 15 or 20 or wherever it went. And we kind of come back down. But although it's now my second largest position, you know, in one portfolio, based on the price action, it's probably 15%. Another portfolio, it's probably like 11% right now. And so I own a lot of other stocks, and a lot of other stocks are working just great. And so I'm fine. And I think people, you know, need to keep in mind for themselves, like size, scale, risk tolerance, you know, how long do you plan to hold something? If you're, you know, wanting to make a 300% upside, are you willing to take kind of a big drawdown? Because that's typically what happens in a lot of these stocks.
They're leveraged Bitcoin equities at the end of the day. I always advocate, for me personally, that the majority of your wealth should be in cold storage Bitcoin. Obviously, I'm a Bitcoin maxi, that's my background. So when you have the volatility with these stocks, you know, I like to call it renew your conviction. whether for me that's every week, I like to look at my stocks and analyze because I'm a nerd. But if it's quarterly for you, every month, every half year, just renew your conviction, understand why you hold the stock, and you should be relaxed.
Yeah, it's interesting. That's the one thing I found in this space, that people have entered either from the TradFi world, which is how you came in, Khristina, and like you kind of discovered Bitcoin this way, as you've told me, right? Where both Zynx and I have come in at this from the maxi Bitcoin maxi space, and it's kind of interesting and it's exciting. The crowd is different than what I'm used to in Bitcoin only. But the reason this is happening is, as I said at on conference last week, is it's the fastest growing area within Bitcoin, is the fastest growing area within TradFi. So you have this beautiful like, if you do a Venn diagram, like this is where it's at. Strategy, Metaplanet, SWC, a bunch of others. There's many of them now, but obviously you got to be careful. You got to think well and do your analysis and your homework before investing.
Do you know who I think has the biggest balls? There's people that have never interacted with the Bitcoin network, but then they're holding, so much Metaplanet, so much Smarter Web, so much strategy. I'm just like, I can only hold these stocks because I have the conviction in Bitcoin. Some people are just jumping that step and just going straight into these stocks, and it's just like, fair play.
Absolutely. And, that's why I was able to enter Metaplanet, so quickly and decisively. It's because at the time when it got on my radar, May 1st, I was already such a believer in Bitcoin, and I'd been around MicroStrategy as an investor for years. And so Metaplanet was like a natural, like, let's go. But it's because I believed in Bitcoin.
That's
some
awesome.
people are going from index funds to Metaplanet, thinking, what's going on?
Right.
Well, imagine if you come from an S&P allocation and putting that in Metaplanet, you're definitely in for a roller coaster, but mostly to the upside. Metaplanet was the best performing stock in the world last year.
In the world.
Yeah,
no, I know. It's incredible.
Yeah. And strategy has been since the best performing stock in the world since 2020, in August, when they announced the strategy. So this is the area where you have the most value growth, the best return, whatever, call it what you want. It's not a dirty word. It's a good thing.
And what's the best performing in 2025?
Ooh. Well,
Smart Web.
Yeah, I mean, again, that's what you spoke about earlier, right? It depends where you start. So when you start with 2 Bitcoin or what it was, you can make better returns. Sadly, I was not in the SWC IPO.
Yeah,
so,
IPO'd at 2.5 pence. It's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, but I have been averaging down into both Metaplanet and SWC at during this negative sentiment at the cost of my strategy position. All right. What you guys have just been talking about here actually segues beautifully into another question of mine. So I am either this week or next week going to share some overall analysis focused on comparing these backs in terms of how much outperformance of Bitcoin that I think that they can do, and therefore also compared to each other. And I did a keynote in Helsinki on that. That's why I just wanted to get this one up. End game goals for BTC Stack. So it's all based on where do I see these companies can go in terms of their and that's of course assumptions, and they're gonna be wrong, and just trying to get it as close to right as possible. So I'll share that on this channel on this week or next week. But someone like Strategy to just share, I think these are conservative numbers. I do believe Strategy will reach 2.1 million Bitcoin. That's conservative. I do think they'll go higher than that. Metaplanet, I used to have a conservative target, I think it is, of 500,000 Bitcoin. But I do think with the speed of, they've just raised enough to buy more than 10,000. They're going to be more than 30,000. And it's only 2025. and Bitcoin is at $112,000, and they're all accumulating Bitcoin despite the price being flat. Remember that when price rises in Bitcoin, it drives sentiment, it drives the ATM, that fuels acquisition. But they're buying Bitcoin even though Bitcoin is flat, and that's nice as an investor. So I used to have a target of 500,000. I have Bitcoin accumulate by Metaplanet by the end game, the time when fiat currency no longer exists. I think I'm going to have to upgrade that higher. It's a very tricky question. No one's going to get it right because we're talking 20 years out. When Bitcoin hits $25 million per Bitcoin, how much have they accumulated? Do you guys have any thoughts? Have you guys looked at it that way? End game BTC stack, are we talking 500,000, 1 million, or no thoughts just yet?
I just haven't even thought that far out.
Yeah, I've got no clue, but I think Jesse Myers has a graphic. He has a graphic that he created where I think it's something like half of the Bitcoin owned by corporate companies is going to be half strategy and then half everyone else. Zynx just called me out.
Yes. Yeah. I don't know what you called out there, but I saw it and I thought it was funny to put it on the screen.
I think he's a TradFi investor that just skipped and went straight to these companies. But yeah. When it comes to the Bitcoin goals, I think Metaplanet will reach their goal 210,000 by the end of 2027. But beyond that, honestly, I have no idea. I think it just all depends on how fast the Bitcoin price goes up, who gets involved. You know, if these super big profitable companies, you know, at the top of, you know, the Mag 7 start stacking Bitcoin, what happens then? These nation states. Yeah, it's hard to project these things, to be honest.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just for me to, but I need to do this analysis in terms of, and I think people will appreciate it. There's going to be, you know, assumptions that go very far out. So it's something you got to adjust, and it's not going to be correct by any means, but at least it's a way of thinking. So what I do is I look at these companies as is, what is their market cap measured in BTC, right? SWC right now has a market cap of around 4,500 Bitcoin maybe, but I think they'll accumulate more than 100,000. So that's going to go up a lot, and they'll probably also trade with a premium by the time we reach the end game. And that's how I like to look at these and compare them. I'll do that, put it out at some stage, and then looking forward to hear if you guys what your thoughts could be in that. But I think at Metaplanet is going to go probably quite a bit higher than that 500,000 that I had in my mind until the international race. It's going fast. Anyway, so what else was there? One last thing here to discuss in terms of what you guys are looking forward to with Metaplanet. I'm guessing that the preferreds is something that we're all looking forward to from Metaplanet. Hopefully Q4. Thoughts?
So
go ahead, Zynx.
Oh no, I was just gonna say I actually just pulled up Jesse Myers' projections to 2045 in regards to the last conversation. He has in 2045, out of the 21 million Bitcoin, he thinks half of it, so 10.5 million, will be owned by Bitcoin treasury companies, and he thinks half of that will be owned by Strategy. He thinks Strategy will reach over 5 million Bitcoin. He thinks that MSTR will have a market cap of $70 trillion, and then the other half, he put Metaplanet and a few others, the remaining 70 trillion. But yeah, that's just for the previous conversation. I thought that'd be interesting. He's done his own projections. To answer your question about looking forward for Metaplanet, I think I'm looking forward to the preferreds. They paid off the debt now, and I'm looking forward to getting that leverage back on the balance sheet. I want them to really just issue as much preferreds as possible, get that leverage, and yeah, I hope they can end the year around 50,000 Bitcoin. at the end of the month, the MSWs will be resumed, the move and strike warrants. And yeah, I'm just hoping they can continue stacking. I'm hoping that sentiment returns for Bitcoin treasuries. I hope we have a wonderful Q4. And yeah, obviously with Bitcoin moving up to 140, 150K, that's best case scenario.
Sounds good to me.
Everything that Zynx said, and I would add that, I heard someone had replied to one of my posts at one point. I think it was Brian Rothenberg, that he had met a new Metaplanet US CFO at Bitcoin Asia, which we haven't heard really a lot about, other than him saying that he had met a new US CFO for Metaplanet at that conference. And so I'm looking forward to hearing a little bit more about that, who that is and what his background is, or her background. And also looking forward to a potential US uplist off OTC to NASDAQ to NYSE, because I think that will help with distribution. It'll improve liquidity even further. And so that's another catalyst that I'm kind of waiting to hear more on.
That's a great point. And then we don't have to pay $50 to Fidelity when we buy or sell. So liquidity should definitely be less of a decision every time you want to go.
Please uplist, because I'm tired of, I have to trade the Tokyo 3350 ticker. Please.
Yeah, you have to get up early for that, Zynx.
No, well, with my broker, I have to place it overnight. I have to place limit orders, and because it opens at 1 a.m. in London. So yeah, please get the uplisting to NASDAQ. Would appreciate it. But yeah, I look forward to that as well. I think that'd be absolutely massive for them.
I can only agree to what both of you said there. Also, just to do a for my own sake here, just want to nail down all the different tools that the companies are doing to raise funds. Am I missing any here? Because in general, I do want to look at every single of these bags in terms of, are they able to use all of these? Which ones are they using? Where they're successful? Where they're not? I think the ATM, which for Metaplanet is what is it, Khristina? Moving strike warrant, MSW.
Yes.
Is the most important tool, and that's why it's so important to have an MNAV as high as possible above 1. Otherwise, there is no yield to be getting from that. Then there is like private placements, or which Metaplanet just did, called an international raise, where you get big institutions, potentially sovereign funds as well. H100 has done some of those as well, maybe not on sovereign fund levels, but private placements. And then there's the preferred perpetual debt. There's convertible bonds. There's selling Bitcoin put options. Am I missing something here in some of these, or what's your takes in terms?
Yeah, I think that's pretty much everything. What I do want to see, perhaps, is, in Europe, we've seen the innovation of Bitcoin denominated convertible bonds. And I'm just waiting for someone else outside of Europe to do something like that. And I think because it's not been done by Metaplanet or Strategy, there's not been much discussions around it. But I actually think it's a brilliant piece of financial engineering. And I want to see Metaplanet maybe perhaps do something like that if the interest is there. But yeah, I think the 3 big tools that you mentioned, they'll be using the ATM, the moving strike warrants, and then the preferreds going forward. Absolutely.
Right. It's so that's a great point. Since you want to see Metaplanet do it, and by the way, I do believe it's something that Tobam pioneered together with Capital B, and then Smarter Web has adopted it. I think they made small changes, but they call it Smarter Convert, Smarter web company. And I think H100 also has done Bitcoin convertible or denominated debt. And I think Strategy kind of, I'm guessing, stopped doing convertible bonds. They were fiat denominated because they wanted to decrease the leverage so that the preferreds would be a more attractive in terms of, because the convertible bonds in case of a bankruptcy are higher in the capital stack, to make the prefs more attractive. But when we are not seeing the major breakthrough of weekly billions of dollars of ATMs, which we will get to, I believe, for strategy on their prefs, maybe, like, to me now, I'm liking convertible bonds, be it fiat or Bitcoin denominated, much more now than I did a few months ago, because the prefs aren't running yet. But what do you guys think?
Fiat-backed convertible bonds, I'm definitely not a fan of.
Okay.
It tends to be a different investor base that's not necessarily strategically aligned with the fundamentals of the Bitcoin Treasury company. And I think that's one of the reasons that Saylor kind of backed away from them, because you often just see these convert buyers turn around and short the heck out of the common stock to hedge the position. And it's just not it hasn't been a great capital alignment in terms of that particular investor base.
Agreed. Yeah, the fiat convertible bonds, absolutely not, because they get hedged and they create a lot of drag on the stock. And that's why the Bitcoin denominated convertible bonds, I really like them. I'm surprised they haven't been adopted, elsewhere, because it is a way to increase leverage on the balance sheet, but without that downside hedging. It's win-win. So essentially, let's say you're an institutional investor and you have some Bitcoin, you give it to the company, and let's say at a conversion rate of 30% premium. If it converts, great, you get the stock, you get the upside. If it doesn't, you just get your Bitcoin back.
Yep.
And I think it's just, it's a beautiful innovation. I would definitely like to see, more companies use that and leverage up their balance sheet that way.
Yeah,
Personally.
I mean, Metaplanet's balance sheet at this point, it's insanely clean. I think they have, 30 million in debt versus 2.9 billion in Bitcoin NAV. So it's like almost no leverage.
Exactly. So hopefully that they can get the leverage up to 25% with the preferreds. We want some leverage, guys. That's why we buy the stock. Get us some leverage.
And if that leverage comes through the preferreds, that's really preferred, no pun intended, because it's perpetual. It doesn't come due at some stage, so the risk is significantly lower. The only thing you have to worry about as the issuer is that dividend. But when you have an asset, you can buy like Bitcoin that goes up, easily expect 30% a year. Not financial advice. And you have to put option selling strategy of generating revenue, as Metaplanet is doing very well. It's looking really interesting. So yeah, I hope to see that the Japan market will maybe even more warmly embrace the press from Metaplanet than the US market has done from strategy. I mean, they've raised billions, granted. They bought a lot of Bitcoin based on it, granted. But I would like to see them just sell billions of prefs, ATMing those for in US. And it's going to happen. I think it's just a matter of time. The sooner the better. All right. I think we've kind of covered everything that we spoke about before the show. Anything you guys want to add, or?
I'm good. I think that was great.
Yeah, no, I think that was good. It was a good discussion. Long Metaplanet.
Long Metaplanet. All three of us are very long, I think, at least relatively for my size in my small portfolio in Metaplanet. And I can just recommend everyone to follow Khristina and Zynx. That's pretty much their handles on X right there. I'm sure if you search for @ and then what you see on the screen, you'll find them. They're putting out a lot of really great thoughts on X. Not financial advice, just my subjective opinion. That's my own X handle, naturally. Loving this space, back after a couple of months of not doing too many shows, but I want to get back on the horse now. This is the second show today because I did do one of 25 minutes before we went live. Here's just some things I wanted to cover. And on Wednesday, Smarter Webly Wednesdays with Jesse and Andrew will be 9 a.m. PST, I think it is. I'm going to schedule that on YouTube and share it. And then Thursday, which is going to be, I think it's going to be the same time with Sander, the executive chairman, Sander Anderson from H100, and Brian Brookshire, who used to be on Metaplanet Roundtable because he is such a phenomenal analyst, but now he works for H100, and therefore I'll get him on that show instead of the Metaplanet Roundtable. But yeah, Khristina and Zynx, thank you so very much for being here. Thank you to the what is it on X? That's where most views are. Combined with YouTube, about 1,600 live viewers. Thank you so much for tuning in, guys. Appreciate it. And not only guys, ladies and gentlemen, I don't know, guys, I kind of feel like it covers both, but maybe it doesn't. I don't know.
It does.
It does, right? Yeah. So thanks for coming on for the first time, Zynx. And
no worries. Everyone can go follow me at Zynx BTC plug. But yeah, no, it's been great. It's been a great discussion, and yeah, it's been enjoyable as well. So thanks for inviting me on.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here and having so much great input. Looking forward to inviting you back on. And Khristina, some final words, maybe.
Buy Metaplanet, not financial advice.
Yeah. All right. Until the next one. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you guys for being here and giving great content. And let's see what happens here the rest of the years. Personally, I'm super bullish, but I could be wrong.